Hello, lovelies. Hello, spiritual nomads, seekers, soulful sisters and brothers. My name is Tracy King, and I am the Gritty Mystic. It is so good to be with you here today. Spirituality, as I suspect for all of you, has been a central part of my life. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian family. My dad was an evangelical pastor and an evangelist of the tent evangelist variety. He left our family when I was 12. And so we found a new spiritual home in the intellectual fundamentalism of a Calvinist church. I went to a Calvinist college. I married into a Christian Reformed family. And I dedicated myself to our church, to serving in children's ministry and women's ministry and worship planning and becoming the youngest female elder of that church. In the scraps of time that I could find while being a mother of 4 children, I read voraciously about the historical cultural context of the Bible, about biblical interpretation and its languages, about discipleship, about apologetics, all to root myself in truth and to forge a sincere experience of God. Basically, it was my kitchen table seminary. My pastor encouraged me to attend seminary, and while I felt flattered by that, I offered all kinds of excuses about why that wouldn't work for my family. But really, I had so much dissonance between what I had been taught was true and what I was coming to realize as true. There was this growing gap that yawned between concept and experience for me. And while I tried to faith away these nagging questions, these concerns in the corner of my mind, it was challenging. And when my marriage came apart and we sat in our pastor's office, this was a new, different pastor, and he told me that I either must stay in my marriage as God expects me to do, despite the abuse I reported, or I would no longer be welcome in the church. That's when my last straw broke. I affectionately call the period in life that happened next as my dumpster fire moment. I left the church. I deeply grieved the loss of my community there. And I finally allowed myself to examine the toxic theology that I had worked so hard to defend, so hard to explain away. I found myself deconstructing my faith. Now, back then, I wasn't aware of anyone talking about religious trauma or deconstruction, and it was a lonely, lonely road. But it was also a journey of rediscovery, of deep healing and reclamation. Now, this deconstruction, this what I call my personal archaeology, basically an entire life reboot, was my spiritual awakening. And since then, my spiritual journey has taken me where my soul has always longed to go, and that's to a personal and profound direct experience with Source. This is why I call myself a mystic. I'm about that direct divine experience life and showing others the way to experience that for themselves as well. So my personal belief from studying history and just living with my eyes wide open right now is that institutional religion is dying. Spirituality, however, is on the rise. There is a massive awakening underway that's shining a bright light on the damage of indoctrination, the damage of toxic theology and church coercion and systematic control, of rampant abuse, of the hush-hush and yet historical roots of white supremacy and Christian nationalism baked into evangelicalism that can no longer be ignored. If you think it's uncomfortable now, it's about to get more uncomfortable because we're at a choice point here. Will we awake and realize how powerful we are? Will we intentionally create what's next? Will we choose love over fear? The strength of diversity over othering? Radical responsibility over shaming and blaming? Will we seize this moment that we have right now, this precious moment to co-create a new earth experience. As one who both feels deeply and who studies deeply, I've dedicated myself to understanding the human experiment in pursuit of a divine experience, including what exactly happened in the first century that resulted in what we see today. And not surprisingly, as Christians, we were not told the truth. As your gritty mystic, as a truth pursuer and a truth teller, I invite you to come with me on a journey for the remainder of this session to peek into the past and to rediscover with me a spiritual technology, a soul science that might speak to you as it has to me about the purpose of this now moment. Are you ready? Are you in? Okay, let's do it. All right. So one of the things that surprised me, and I think surprises a lot of people who are deconstructing, is that as you disassemble and examine the components of indoctrinated belief, you're left without a structure, without a container, without hooks to hang what you choose to keep and adapt versus what you choose to discard in terms of beliefs and practices and just a spiritual goal. And this can feel chaotic. It can feel disorienting when you've been steeped in structure like theology and catechism and liturgical seasons and creeds. So how does one go about reconstructing after deconstruction? If you still desire a spiritual path, because some people deconstruct to atheism, how do you orient yourself among all of the possibilities? There's so many possibilities for practice and spiritual point of view. What's the point anymore? What's the goal? If throughout your spiritual experiences, you've deeply desired to experience God as I did, now that you've deconstructed, is there actually a meaningful mystical experience to aspire to actually attain? Well, I'm going to share with you an organizing framework to orient you to where you are in your awakening process, what types of practices may serve you best where you are, and how this framework offers a pathway to authentic spiritual experience. But first, a story. A little over 2,000 years ago, when Christianity was born, it was created among a large variety of mystery schools or mystery religions. The mystery school template originated in Africa, likely Kemet, and was translated across cultures and regions for centuries. Now, the mystery schools were comprised of an outer mystery, which was an allegorical story sequence intended to inspire virtuous behavior, and an inner mystery in which initiates learned the true meanings of the allegorical stories, and they were apprenticed in spiritual technologies. Now, one of the most common and successful outer mystery allegories was the sun god savior myth. Osiris, Dionysus, Attis, Mithras, Adonis, so many more, so many. The gist of this myth was that the sun god chose to be born a man to serve as an example as well as a blood sacrifice so that followers could be born again, so that they could die to their lower self and become their true higher self. Sound familiar? Other key story elements of this sun god savior mystery religion allegory are an auspicious star followed by wise men at the birth of the incarnated God, a virgin birth in a cave, a precocious and spiritually wise child, a coming of age temptation in the desert type of experience, a baptism, acquiring disciples, offering a chance to be born again through baptism, a host of miracles like turning water into wine, healing the sick, raising the dead, and a ministry that culminates in riding triumphantly into town on a donkey, of dying as a sacrifice for sins of the world, of resurrecting on the third day, and afterward, the sun god savior's death and resurrection were continued to be celebrated by adherents through a ceremonial meal consisting of bread and wine. It really sounds like I'm describing Jesus, doesn't it? But this mythos precedes the Jesus story. And so scholarly study of contemporary literature, of linguistics, what artifacts remain demonstrate that the Christian narrative is not original. It's a Jewish adaptation of the ancient mystery religions. Now, back then, adapting the mystery school template to a culture was, it wasn't frowned upon. It was actually pretty common. There are at least 20 mystery schools, probably more, using the sun god savior template at that time. And it's important to realize that the mystery schools coexisted without competition. They viewed all of these iterations as legitimate options to access spiritual technology. This was actually one of the reasons why it was so challenging for Roman emperors to organize their people around one religion, because these mystery schools were cool with each other. I mean, they just, they didn't feel the need to dominate or usurp the others. They didn't proselytize. They didn't coerce commitment. Now, the Jesus mystery cult was late on the scene, and there were a few key differences departing from the ordinary patterns of the mystery schools. One of the things that was really unique about Christianity is that it sought to interpret the mystery school template into the Jewish culture that was already yearning for a Messiah, for their Savior King. But it's quite clear, though, that this approach didn't work because the first century Jews didn't want an allegorical savior. They wanted a political king. They wanted a flesh and blood Messiah to overthrow Roman tyranny. So this right here may be the seed of why early Jesus mystery religion members began to claim that even though the other mystery schools' outer religion mythos was allegorical, that Jesus was actually a literal live human. Well, first and second century authors, you can read what they wrote. They lambast the absurdity of this forgery, essentially saying, you copy and pasted our allegorical stories. We see what you're doing here. And now you're claiming that your allegory is literal truth. That's nonsense. Like, cut it out. But as we know, this did not stop literalist Christianity from maintaining that claim. Another group that vocally countered the literalist Jesus claim was the Gnostics. Now, there is convincing scholarly evidence that Gnosticism was the inner mystery of the Jesus cult. Now, much of the kerfuffle of the early church, even as witnessed in Paul's letters, was Christian literalism, the outer mystery, seeking to discredit Gnosticism, the inner mystery. Because Gnostic literature has been recovered, we can read now that the Gnostics perceived all of them as belonging to one Jesus religion. And reading Gnostic literature that survived, we can also see that they considered the Jesus story allegorical and that it was an invitation to achieve Christ consciousness, which is consistent with the goal of the other inner mysteries, a series of initiations toward becoming your soul self, of integrating with the one mind. But dissenting voices ultimately were silenced when Constantine recognized literal fundamentalist Christianity could be wielded as a sharp tool to support his imperialism and his empire building. So consequently, Christians were empowered at that time to then eradicate mystery schools. A systematic campaign of destroying literature and art and artifacts and even people was waged, a silence through violence. There was one version, however, that survived. It is a secular version that was transported outside of Christianity's reach and then later hidden in plain sight. And that is alchemy. Now, alchemy was a hot topic All of the speculation of turning lead into gold, quite exciting. And while the scientific pursuits of alchemy did lead to the birth of modern chemistry, influenced medicine and pharmacology and homeopathy, even inspiring quantum physics and influencing the work of persons such as Albert Einstein. The materialist aim to create gold is an allegory for the spiritual technology of alchemy. Now, while there was and continues to be a lot of secrecy around the inner mystery initiations, we do know that they were organized in 3 phases. The first was catharsis, communion, and then epiphany. And these 3 phases perfectly align with the 3 awakenings within alchemy. Now, this is not to say that alchemists weren't persecuted, because they were. Alchemy originated in Egypt, as far as we know. It predated the mystery schools. Egyptian alchemists were at first embraced by the Greeks, and we can see the influence of alchemical texts and concepts in Greek philosophy. But then it was considered dangerous by the Roman conquerors and summarily suppressed. So Roman Emperor Diocletian, for example, ordered alchemical writings to be destroyed. And then, of course, later under Constantine, alchemists themselves were severely persecuted. Ironically, this is amazing. A sect of mystical Christians smuggled alchemical texts into Arabia. I know, who would have guessed? It's so good. So by 400 AD, all that survived were a few key Egyptian texts that had been translated into Arabic, and Arabian alchemists preserved the knowledge. In fact, our word alchemy comes from the Arabian phrase alchemia, which literally translates into from the black soil of the Nile Delta. And according to scholars, Egyptian alchemists used the term chem, to refer to life force, to refer to the first matter. And so esoterically, the word alchemy really means from the first matter, which is so alchemical. I mean, it's an inside joke because everything is derived from first matter, and understanding that the first matter that is core to all of alchemical transformation is part of being an alchemist. So anyway, knowledge of alchemy spread through the Middle East into the Orient, and then came back into Europe. And the principles were considered so powerful that they were kept under layer upon layer upon layer of symbolism and cipher. I mean, so layered as to appear as utter nonsense to anyone who would just look at it. I mean, have you seen alchemical art? It looks crazy. It looks absolutely crazy. Even, at times Christian symbolism was employed, like the Trinity, like the Tetragrammaton, images, symbols of death and resurrection. All these things were incorporated as clever camouflage so that alchemy could hide in plain sight. Now, with the Crusades, we know that the manuscripts were further dispersed and that the science of transformation really took hold, and so much so that alchemy actually became a leading intellectual movement in Europe, even to the point of some universities starting to replace works of Aristotle with alchemical texts. And ironically, again, even clerics of the church became practicing alchemists. So head snap. What? Full circle. So during the Middle Ages, hard time, harsh time, so much poverty, greed for gold led to what's called as puffers, posing as alchemists to scam the naive, which in turn damaged alchemy's reputation. So laws were enacted to crack down on alchemy charlatans, and, alchemy was kind of tamped down as a way to take advantage of people as evil again. But then the Renaissance and a massive resurgence of alchemy came to the forefront. But then the rise of modern science prioritized chemistry and labeled alchemy a pseudoscience. So alchemy was chucked and it was left to be forgotten. But more recently, alchemy is making its way back into our collective conversation. The history of alchemy has become a recognized academic area of study, has its own journal, has its own professional societies, all of that good stuff. And it's come a long way from ancient times before record to today. At this point, you might be saying, that's all very interesting, Tracy King, but what's the it that we're talking about? Well, let's get into that. Alchemy is not just a transformational framework. It's a technology of transmutation, revealing one's highest form. The allegory of alchemy is that the successful alchemist, through a series of very precise yet mysterious, because no one was willing to share their secrets, processes called calcination, dissolution, separation, conjunction, fermentation, distillation, and coagulation, we're able to reduce lead to the purest element of first matter, and from first matter, create gold. Spiritual alchemy is a map of the evolution of consciousness. It's a framework depicting where you are in the levels of awakening, suggesting what practices may be most beneficial to becoming your full self, your highest form. Shall we take a sneak peek at the framework? Okay, let's do it. So I want to just, reiterate that alchemy is not a religion. Alchemy is not a belief system. It's a transmutation process. And the end result is transitioning from your lead human experience to gold, to fully embodying your soul self. So let's dip a toe in with a modern allegorical overview. Imagine for a moment an iceberg out in the ocean. Can you see it? Big old iceberg floating out there. And this iceberg is you. The top of your iceberg is unaware of the underwater expanse of your iceberg. And the underwater iceberg part of you is not directly in contact with the above water iceberg part of you, but it's definitely influencing the whole iceberg experience from below. The above water iceberg part of you is your conscious mind. And that below the water iceberg part of you is your subconscious mind, and often where we tuck away our woundings, things we interpret as shameful, parts of ourselves that we don't like or that we essentially deny. It's all still there. We just don't want to look at it. And so we push it outside of our conscious awareness. So the first awakening is to realize that you're not the above the water iceberg or the below the water iceberg. You're the whole iceberg. And the alchemical processes at work here are the healing of the conscious and the subconscious mind so that you can integrate the two into a coherent whole. This is where we engage deconstruction work. This is where we engage conscious and subconscious wound work, where we engage boundary work and reclaiming consent, where we engage shadow work, intentional belief construction, where we spend some time examining our triggers and rewriting our stories. This is when we articulate our personal values and we work on building critical thinking and choice mechanism muscles that atrophied under systems of indoctrination. Perhaps you engage in body work to move unconscious holds into your conscious awareness so that you can see and heal them. This is a time for therapy support and processing experiences, and a time for finding your soul family community. All of these processes and practices that we engage within this awakening are meant to facilitate the alchemical integration of our whole self, of our conscious and unconscious self. Some people stop here. They create a space here where they feel whole, where they feel comfortable, where they feel healed, and perhaps they resolve themselves as agnostic or atheist. But others feel a tug to wade into deeper spiritual waters. And as you made headway into your healing and reconstruction work in that first phase, if you are looking to discover what spirituality means for you now, you'll begin to realize that you're not just the iceberg, you're the ocean too. And as you've integrated your whole iceberg, you didn't just become a more complete iceberg, an entirely new state of consciousness emerged. You realize that you're the creator of your experience. You recognize and feel the oneness of all people and the importance and inherent power of living in a collective. You begin to differentiate your thoughts and your energy from guides and allies. You feel kindred with creation and the wisdom of nature. You realize that you're so much more powerful than you understood before, and new gifts emerge that you can work with and expand. And at this time also, you forge a relationship with your higher self, with your soul self. Now, these reality-shaking realizations profoundly shift our experience, and they suggest new processes and practices to alchemize this knowing to an integrated way of being. It just radically shifts the concept of who we are, who our authentic self really is. So at this time, during this awakening, you'll likely circle back to your belief structure again, and you'll align it with what you know now. We will often continue to work on limiting beliefs, and we will deepen that healing, just reviewing old programming that still seems to subconsciously be directing behavior. We become more attentional about setting up aligned structures and practices in our life that support spiritual growth and support our clear gift development. We may seek healing modalities to address trauma, now at a new level, taking radical responsibility for creating a new experience for ourselves. This is a time where we can really engage forgiveness work. Because we see ourselves differently in those stories now that we have a broader awareness, a different level of consciousness about who we are and what we're doing here. This is a season in which we engage intentional vibration management, because it becomes important as part of our daily experience to understand where we are vibrationally and to bring intention into that day-to-day experience versus riding the waves of conditions. You may at this point begin channeling your higher self or your guides. But regardless, you gain clarity from your guide team about what will accelerate your personal growth. Whether you choose to engage in that guidance is up to you. But the beautiful thing is that there's even more. So remember, there are 3 awakenings. There's catharsis, communion, and epiphany. In alchemy, these represent awakening to more expansive levels of consciousness. So as you integrate the learnings of the second awakening, a new realization drops in, that you're not just the iceberg in the ocean, you are the cosmos itself. Now you see what's really seeking to emerge, what becoming actually means. The remaining milestones of spiritual alchemy are about integrating your higher self and living from your soul self point of view. It's about shedding the perspective that your higher self is some super identity chilling, like out there in the ether separate from you. No. The culmination, your mission, should you choose to accept it, of the alchemical journey is to become all that you are, to become all that you are right here, right now. Not just tapping into higher wisdom, but becoming it. Not just accessing higher consciousness, but being fully conscious. This is what the Gnostics called achieving Christ consciousness. This is what has been referred to for millennia as enlightenment. This actualization is your soul self manifest in your physical form. It's you now. It's all of you. It's your whole self. And yes, you are capable of that if you choose this path. I have to say, from what I've experienced and channeled and heard, it's more available now than it has ever been before, because more is possible now than ever before. We have legends of people who have integrated their soul self, but the thing is, the more people who embark on this journey, even if they don't go all of the way to Christ consciousness, they contribute to what's possible for our collective. Vibrationally, more becomes possible within our collective. And the gorgeous thing about this framework is that it's not only for individual consciousness evolution. That's where we often focus when we're starting, because we're starting from a point of pain, wanting to relieve trauma and improve our personal experience. But this is actually also about our collective too. It's about evolving as a collective and becoming what we are capable of being together. So when you think about the iceberg, think about it in terms of our collective. Where do you think our collective is in that story? We've got some room to grow, don't we? Yeah, we've got some room to move here. What I see is the dissonance, the revelation of old wounds in the subconscious of our society and our culture that are now messy and out in the open. It's all an opportunity for us to awaken as a collective, to deconstruct and reconstruct as a culture, to see and heal what has been considered shameful, woundings we didn't want to look at. It's all out in the open. And it's our radical responsibility now to engage in that healing, to integrate the conscious and unconscious awareness of our collective. And as we do, as we awaken to how powerful we are together, more is possible. I encountered alchemy in 2020, which was a profoundly spiritual year for me. And I was like, when I came across it, I don't even know precisely how it entered my study, my conversations, but I was like, guide team, you couldn't have mentioned this before. You couldn't have connected me to this before. I mean, why haven't I seen this before now? Because I had been channeling and applying myself to this channeled content for 12 years at this point. And it was directly in alignment with this ancient yet hella relevant process. I could instantly see that it was a map. I could see where I had been and precisely where I was and what I was working on in that moment. And I felt like prior to that, I had been feeling my way through the dark for all of those years, that I couldn't see my progress because I didn't have anything to orient myself or to measure the distance or even know how many milestones were on this journey. I just had committed myself to it, and I didn't know if I was taking baby steps or if there were quantum leaps in there. I had no way of knowing until I began to study alchemy. So this is my message. An ancient spiritual technology for this monumental modern moment in the evolution of consciousness is readily available. And it speaks volumes of all that you have accomplished in your journey in this life so far, and what's possible if you want to take it deeper. So, within this context, what does spiritual growth even mean? Well, from an alchemical point of view, spiritual growth is becoming who you are. It's becoming your highest form. And how you perceive who you are expands with each of the three awakenings. The channeled sequence that I was working with, that I have been steeped in and have shared in my podcast, The Gritty Mystic, as well, is align, allow, and be. And it's a perfect overlay of what we've talked about today for our modern moment and the masses of people who are coming online right now, realizing that they are more, that we are meant for more. So let me just chat you up a bit about those three components and how they lay over top of this beautiful ancient technology. First, align. You have accepted stories, yours and others, about who you are and why you are here, why you are the way you are. But it's time to examine, are they true? It's time to take stock of your iceberg and to integrate all of the gorgeous facets of yourself, to take a look at and to love on the parts of you that you've stuffed down, that you've hidden away out of sight, to heal and integrate your iceberg, owning all of your magnificence, all of who you really are. This journey of healing feels at first like a coming apart. It's hard. It hurts. Relationships end. Some people can't deal with you becoming a different person when they want you to fill certain needs like you have before, but that's not your work. That's not your problem. Your path and your process is to realize who you are and to carve out an authentic path for yourself to live as the authentic you. So let the sorting begin. What belongs to you and what doesn't belong to you? What feels authentic to you and what doesn't feel authentic to you? Connect with the practices and the resources and the people that help you see and heal woundings and embrace the authentic you that you know is in there, that you know who he or she is, but maybe have been feeling tentative about exploring or stepping into openly and really claiming that as your authentic identity. Yeah, it is you. It's you. So step into that authenticity. Align with who you truly are. The second component is to allow. Now, if you're one of the daring and ready, let's go deeper. Let's expand your experience. Let's commit to a consciousness upgrade. It's time to embrace the practices and the processes of allowing a broader awareness of who you are outside of your conscious and subconscious mind to emerge now and to mature in your experience. Your newly integrated self, your whole iceberg, on its healing journey, now rooted in the earth, now connected to your soul self-consciousness. As you are rooted and connected, you're going to see what more is possible, but you have to allow it to manifest in your life. So you can see it and you can say, no, thanks, it's not for me. Or you can see it and you can open a crack and start to let a little bit come through, allow a little bit of that experience to manifest. But the more you crack it open, the more you allow, the greater expansiveness you'll experience and the more you'll find is possible for you. Now, know that you're not going to get steamrolled by spirit guides. There are no have-tos in spiritual development. But if you want to, allow more of who you are in this moment. Allow new gifts to emerge, and then practice with them. Allow your soul wisdom to be part of your everyday experience, your everyday interactions. Just step into this new realm of authenticity that's empowered by the broader perspective of your soul, of the soul that incarnated as you. The more you do, the more you're going to see who you truly are. It's a beautiful, gorgeous thing. And then third is to be. Now comes the fun part. We've been doing. We've been growing. We've been practicing. We've been processing. We've been healing. But when the next level of consciousness is born within you, you realize that you're not separate from your higher self. Being is about becoming your soul self now. It's about living from your soul self point of view in this body. It's spirit manifest in this form. And there's a lot less doing to being. Oh, how simple it sounds and how complex we make it. Now you are aligning with your soul self. You're allowing the merger of your incarnated self with your higher self to transmute your experience once again so that you can be your higher self right here, right now. Just imagine for a moment what that would mean on a day-to-day perspective. What would it be like to live your days from your broader soul self perspective, to step that into your relationships, to step that into your work or your business, to step that into all of your decision making? Just imagine what more is possible. So much. It's so good. So within each of the awakenings, there are 2 to 3 milestones. There are 7 milestones in all. And the milestones help us know where we are as we chart our journey, like a you are here map. So if you feel stuck, like you're not progressing, we can troubleshoot which processes may be incomplete that need to be fully resolved, allowing us to access the next phase, or see just the nuance and perhaps complications of the processes that you're in right now, or identify other processes that might help you get momentum beneath where you want to go and grow. I bet by stepping through the iceberg allegory, you already have an idea of where you are right now. And you already know whether this doorway to the divine sparks resonance with you, or whether it's more like, that was interesting, Tracy King, but a no for me. And both are fine responses. If what I've shared with you today sparks interest, I invite you to tune into the Gritty Mystic podcast for nuggets of insight and conversations with coaches, teachers, authors, and healers who practice modalities that support the processes that I've described. And if you're feeling a deeper resonance and want to learn more about what this means for you specifically, then let's connect. You can learn more about me and my work at grittymystic.com. You can leave me a message or a voicemail on my website. I'm also on the Instagram. You can connect with me there for news and happenings, and we can be friends. We can have a conversation. I am delighted to have spent these few minutes with you. And I thank you for stepping onto this planet at such an incredibly important time in our personal and collective evolution. Truly, we rise together. Be blessed.